Welcome to the Legacy Tree Podcast. We're the team at Legacy Tree Genealogists, and this is where we talk about the real side of family history. The surprises, the roadblocks, the emotions, and the stories that don't always fit neatly into a pedigree chart. From DNA discoveries to archival finds, cultural history to personal moments, we have honest conversations about what genealogy actually looks like and why it matters. Because when it comes to preserving what matters most, you deserve to put your family history in our hands. In today's episode, Heirloom Preservation, Capturing Legacy Beyond Objects, we're joined by Luke of MemoirGhostwriting.com, a specialist in memoir ghostwriting, alongside Heather Nickerson, founder and CEO of Artifcts.com. Together, they explore how families can preserve legacy in deeply meaningful ways, from transforming life stories into memoirs to documenting the history and significance of cherished belongings. This conversation reveals how heirloom preservation goes far beyond physical items, connecting memory, storytelling, and identity across generations.
Thanks, Mandi. At Artifacts, we are a technology tool and we help genealogists capture, preserve, and share the family histories, the stories, the memories behind all their keepsakes. So it could be old photos, it could be Nana's needlepoint cushions, it could be a piece of family heirloom jewelry. There's really no end to like what it is. But our whole premise is that if you're going to be passing down these items that have family history, the stories and the history and memory should go with the actual item. And that way it has a better chance of staying in the family, right? Like someone's going to want the needlepoint cushions when they know the story of grandma and the work she put into it and what inspired her or whatever that happens to be, versus just, hey, I got some old couch cushions. So we
Right.
family historians keep the family history and the items together for generations.
Gotcha. I love that. Cool. And then Luke, tell me more about what you do and maybe how that might relate to genealogy as well.
Yeah, so Heather made it really easy because the reality is we do sort of the cousin of that. We do what Heather does, but for understanding someone's entire life story. So memoirghostwriting.com has a really lame name. It's just whatwedo.com. And two things are true. One is, we do a lot of public facing work, but most of the time, some of the most exciting stories that we do are the ones that stick just with families because our whole North Star goal is how do we explain for future generations where people came from, what made their ancestors tick, and so on. And the question we always sort of use to frame that for people is, what would you have liked written down by your own grandfather or grandmother? That's what we're trying to do when we have these conversations. And so instead of keeping in an artifact like Heather's company, we keep stories, right? It could be that cocktail party story that your grandpa has told 1,000 times and it changes a little bit each time. But it could also be things like the actual story of how your parents met. Or, sometimes they're sad stories. More often they're happy stories, but we want to get to uh, the roots of understanding. And it doesn't have to be perfect, much like genealogy. There's still going to be questions at the end. We're not therapists. We help people find those turning points, but um, we're going to find the themes of someone's life, but we're not going to answer all the questions. So I always encourage people to aim for, I say 97% of their full life story, because we can exclude certain things if we want, or if they want rather. But we also don't have to get it all. Our goal is to get as much as we can, as much as they want to preserve in the same place in a robust, largely comprehensive, uh, lasting version that 200, 300, 400 years in the future, people are going to pick up and read and understand where they come from.
What I really love about this dynamic of, Legacy Tree with Memoir Ghostwriting and Artifacts all talking together right now is the it's like a Venn diagram, if I could like visually put it together, right? And we've got this like there's a lot of heart right in the center of it. There's a lot of passion and family storytelling and history and documenting right in the center of what we all three of us do. Um, I don't know how we want to kick this off, but like, can you guys think of maybe a cool story that we can share or why you feel like this might mean something to someone? How does this change people's lives or impact their souls and find that little heart right in the center of what we do?
So Heather, if you don't mind, I actually, as soon as I heard your description, had a burning question for you. I'm sure you see a lot of the same things, but can you tell us a couple of things that you've seen over the years that people have preserved that just sort of took you by surprise?
That's a great question, Luke. I'll share two. I think one of the most surprising things. So our platform is private by default, right? Everything you create is private unless or until you want to share. A lot of our family historians and genealogists who use artifacts love to share because they want to tell their story, right? So we oftentimes get folks sharing artifacts with us and our executive team because they're super excited, like, look what I just did. So one of the ones that got shared with us several years back was an 8 foot long boa constrictor snakeskin. And it's one of those things you're kind of just like, well, that's interesting. And it turns out the woman who shared it with us, she's the matriarch of the family. She's got 3 sons and if I believe 10 or 11 grandchildren. She was downsizing, and this was during the later years of COVID. She had her granddaughter come and artifact with her as they were going through the downsizing process. And she was so giddy because what she did was she kept the snakeskin now for probably 40 or 50 years. I don't remember exactly, but it'd been on her bookshelf. And when they were going through it, her daughter was like picked it up and according to her was going to dump it in the trash bag because it's falling apart. It's got scales everywhere, whatever. And I guess she told her, as she told us, she told her granddaughter, now, dear, you don't want to put that in the trash bag. There's a story behind it. And then she proceeded to tell the whole story, which her granddaughter captured in artifacts, not just the written story, but also the audio of grandmom telling the story. And it turns out they'd been on, I think, safari in Kathmandu or outside Kathmandu, and they came across the snake, and her fellow compatriots that were with her were too afraid, so she shot the snake. And then the guys were like, great, we'll skin it for you. Now the snakeskin has traveled the world with her. And it's one of those things you just kind of, it makes you realize, wow, like each family has their own stories and their own histories, and they all keep different items. And that, I think, to answer the question, one of the weirdest or most interesting, I don't want to call any artifact weird, but most interesting is a snakeskin. And it's one of the reasons why this member wrote into us was she was so excited. Her granddaughter essentially claimed dibs of, Grandma, when you're no longer here, I now want the snakeskin. It wasn't going in the trash bag. It wasn't going to Goodwill. And that story kind of, it's now spread across the family. It's part of their family lore. But had they not thought to ask, or had the granddaughter not been helping her downsize and go through her items, it could have very easily been lost. And it was a very important kind of part of the grandmother's life story. On the other side, we see, I think much more common is, family heirlooms like jewelry or artwork, or if family quilts are a big one that have a lot of story and sentiment behind them. And it's really nice when we have members write in and tell us, well, we were going through, they were either downsizing or simply having like a family reunion or family holidays, and they started telling the stories behind these items. And what we hear more often than not is that when they share the stories, the items suddenly find a new home. And they
Mm.
may not take them right away if their loved one's still enjoying the item, but I think it debunks the whole myth you hear so much these days of how, no one wants our stuff, right? Like we all hear that. And I think it's beautiful when you hear the story and you know the history, suddenly it becomes not just, oh, it's, a piece of jewelry I don't like, or, well, that's an interesting piece of art, to like, oh my gosh, this was, the ring that grandpa gave grandma when he came back from World War II. And it has this, again, it connects people, it connects places, it connects sometimes even historical milestones. And I think people have a greater appreciation for the item, which is why it ends up getting a new home or being kind of a coveted piece of family history that they can share the story around. So that's kind of just two small examples, but they're always fun when you hear them. And I'm sure, Luke, you've got some probably really great examples of family stories and kind of probably questions unanswered that no one thought to ask, and then stories untold.
Yeah, there's so much in what you just said. I mean, the first is I I firmly believe that we sort of selfishly understand our parents. I say that somewhat jokingly from ages 3 forward. And so that period of time, we spend an outsized amount of time on, who our parents were before us, because that's where a lot of the mystery is. And people say, I told my kids that story, and yeah, you have, but it was like on a road trip when people were screaming and there's chaos. It's got to get written down. And I always to remove my own bias from that process, I say with us, with someone else, with one of these Amazon guidebooks where you fill in the blanks. It doesn't matter. You just got to start writing something. Um, and the other part of this is much to your point of items having different meaning as people age, essentially. Um, Sometimes I hear from people, who's going to care? My kids have this approach, my grandkids have that approach. The reality is, it's that approach now. But you might know your grandkids when they're 15, and with any luck, they've got another 75 years, and they're going to start asking these questions and having these curiosities around, how do I make sense of what's in front of me? You make sense of what's in front of you by looking back a little bit, as cheesy as it sounds. You start to understand where we come from, what's common between different groups of people, what's uncommon. Um, and it doesn't have to be uh, the full picture. I know I sound like a broken record there, but I love what you do, Heather, because it's definitively not the full picture. It's a little bit here, a little bit there. It's driven by items. You get the full picture of the item and the story behind it. But, I only have a couple stories about my own great-grandfather. And I love them and I cling to them because that is my lens of understanding. I don't actually need the full, robust life. I would like it if it were available. It's not, and I've made peace with that. But you at least need some way to move um, into the sphere of understanding as a person. Of course, bringing this back to genealogy, you can't understand who they are as a person until you understand that they were a person. And so you first have to start, well, you don't have to first, but a good place to start is saying, let's see what we can fill in a family tree. And as Mandi knows very well, even that you can't fully fill in, right? And some people deliberately don't want to fill in certain parts. They're worried about like the strange uncle. And all I would say is I have had the privilege of, with my team, supporting a whole lot of people over the years. All of them have been interesting. Truly, there hasn't been a single one where I go, oh, wish we didn't listen to that. But every single one of them, except the rare occasion, has a weird uncle or equivalent. They have the somebody where the family goes, oh, we don't really talk about Tom. And you go, okay. And you move past it. And so, I'm sure, Heather, you have equivalents in your neck of the woods, so to speak, where someone comes across items where they go, this is a hobby I didn't know they had, or something like that. And Mandi, you probably see the same with, well, that's the side of the family we don't talk about. But I, as sort of I joke that we are at times wildly unlicensed therapists. And what I mean is we don't provide advice, we don't cast judgment, but like we anecdotally do get to survey a lot of different life stories. And there are some distinct commonalities, and some of them, eh, again, it sounds cheesy, are that life is rocky for pretty much everyone. I mean, whether it's you as the individual or as part of a family, there is no family's story that goes sort of, this linear progression of growth. Um, and and so it's just, I think you start by just saying, how do we get most of it in the same place? Not all of it, not with perfection, just everything that we can in the same place, barring the things that are going to prevent us from doing that. So I know when someone mentions a storage facility, for instance, maybe this is different in your world, Heather, but when someone mentions a storage facility, I often think, oh, I need to suggest to them that we should put that last. Because if I ask someone in their mid 80s to find the keys to the storage facility and drive 30 minutes away and open it up and go through boxes, they won't do any of the other parts, and we will miss out on the opportunity of getting most of their life story down in pursuit of the perfection of all of it. Um, so I'm always cautioning people to focus on the things nearest and dearest to them. And when I say things, I truly mean physical objects sometimes. Crossing into your world, Heather, I know from visiting people's homes in doing this, which is sometimes part of what we do, that the three most important places in someone's house for what's important to them are, in the third spot, it's whatever's behind them on a video call. Right? Whatever they choose to put behind them is really important, but not the most important. The second is it's a tie really, but what's in front of them on their desk, those three photos that make the cut. And then the third is whatever's next to them on their nightstand. If you go into someone's house and you only get those three locations, you've identified like 70% of what's important to them. The other 30 is a bonus. So you don't have to go through everything. You just got to be strategic about where are we going to find the best stuff, and let's start there.
Luke, I think you're spot on with that. We always tell our members, to your earlier point, like perfection is not the end goal. It's getting something, anything down, right? Capture the story, capture with what's there, what's within reach. For us, we often talk about framed photos, to your point about
Yeah.
what's on the nightstand, right? You families have sometimes dozens of framed photos. But who's in the photo? Sometimes one generation removed, you don't even know who that person is because you probably know grandmom as you see grandmom. But you didn't know grandma when she was 18 and going to, like get the ice cream sundae with her high school friends. And it's a very different, I think we all in our own minds have perceptions of what our parents were like, our grandparents were like, our great grandparents were like. But then when you see them oftentimes in black and white, or sometimes even those, like the earliest photos, you're like, who is that? So we often say start with photos. It's a great place to start. Tell the who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah.
The other thing that we often tell our members, I think, Mandy, I suspect you all relate to this too, is that you never want to be the next generation's genealogy research project, right? Like
Hmm.
alive today, like
Yeah.
you able to tell your story. And even if you don't know all the details of the generation before you and the generation before that, start with your story, because we can guarantee you that at some point down the road, two, three generations after you, they're going to want to know your story. It matters. And you're alive today, so tell it. So I think that all plays into the whole, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you've got to start. You've got to start somewhere. And I think, Mandy, I'd love to know, how do you all with legacy tree genealogists, how do you get people over those initial hurdles of you've got to do something, like even a baby step?
Yeah, it's hard too sometimes because we have like a lot of people that have been doing their own work and then they'll come in and they're like, I'm stuck on this one spot. And we like to make sure that all of the work is, verified. Because sometimes if we find there's like, especially when you get further back, there's parts of generations where it was normal societally to have multiple Marys in one family, or you know what I mean? There was lots of people with the same name, and so it's easy to find the wrong person. And so we want to make sure that we're finding the right people and that we're breaking down the right brick wall. And it's hard sometimes to like take a step back and say, okay, what's our overall research goal? What do we want to achieve? And how can we like start where we are and make sure everything is documented properly and accurate. And, that's sometimes I think the hardest part too is understanding what the research goal is and what's achievable within a certain amount of time. And like, it's just because we have all these things, and sometimes just there's mysteries that we just can't solve. And one of the things you guys have talked about a lot is, it reminds me of some content that we've put out previously. Our content was called How to Be a Good Ancestor. And
Hmm.
it's, just in general, how do you document your life in a way that people can do it? And so that's a fun piece of like just another plug-in content piece that we've done. That's just a fun way to think of how are we living our life right now? And then eventually, our grandkids, great grandkids are going to be doing research on us. What stories do our belongings, our journals, our census records, what stories do they tell? And I think it's fun to take all of the records that we find in genealogy research and pair them with the journals and the written stories, and then the belongings and things that go with them. Like those little treasured boxes that you find in grandma's house that have, old like um, army discharge papers or, things like that. Those are my favorite types of things to find when I'm talking to my grandparents and just thinking of how can I be a good ancestor today? I'm 35. How can I be a good ancestor?
It's funny you mentioned the honorable discharge papers because we generally aim for, we tell people, regardless of what the end product is, whether it's a full-length memoir, a mini memoir, just the transcripts, or any variation thereof, when we start integrating photos, we've identified that there are like pretty much 6 photos that we need in like all versions. And if you don't have all 6, that's fine. But like, it's age 2, it's age 5, it's early career. If they're in the military, we need that. Wedding photo and one close to their age now. Um, we say age 2 because even though I've got some kids myself, I will admit that below age 2, most kids just look alike. My wife and I actually have an ornament on our tree where the stock photo looks so similar to one of our sons that we keep it in a, it's literally just like it's the stock kid. Um, but if you hit those points, like age 2, they start to look like a real person. Age 5, you get a little bit of flavor and flair, like maybe they're in some cute overalls playing a game, and it gives you a snapshot of the time. Early career or end of college is a great one. It shows them in a relatable fashion to those who are probably reading it, say, oh, most likely closest in age to this photo here. But Mandy, to your point about military papers, we look for one of 2 things. It is either the full dress uniform, which is a great photo to have, or it is actually those discharge papers. And most veterans, when you go through the household papers, if that's part of the project, uh, they have them, and it is as cheesy as it sounds, the end of the chapter, right? In life, in the writing, you show the papers, and everyone else who's gone through that experience knows exactly what they are. And it's often followed up by a completely new pursuit in life. And so uh, totally with you. Discharge papers are great. Letters of importance are great. Scans of old IDs. Maybe they were a college professor and they got their first ever ID that says, assistant professor of blah, blah, blah. And boom, that's got to make it in. Um, Heather, what are some of the, like, if someone comes to you and they say, I have a whole house full of stuff and I don't even know where to begin, what do you tell them just to like get to the most important stuff and nothing else?
Yeah, that's a great question, Luke. So we typically we designed our technology to be very much DIY, right? So our team is not going into someone's house. We do partner with professional organizers or move managers or photo managers or even like hospice. It's a wide range of who we partner with who may be in your house. But if our members write into us and ask, like I've downloaded artifacts and I'm ready to go, but I'm feeling very overwhelmed. How do I start? We typically will engage in a conversation, kind of ask, like, what is most important to them? Like, what is their end goal? Are they trying to downsize and declutter? And they want to capture the memories behind key pieces that maybe aren't going with them, like a family piano, a family table, those items. Are they thinking more about estate planning or insurance purposes? And they want to ensure that not just the value and the history of the item is documented, but also the story and the memories. So we try to figure out kind of what is motivating them to really take action. And sometimes it's simply just it's sentimental, right? Like they got gifted the account for a holiday or a birthday, and their loved ones were like, "Hey, grandma, start artifacting." And in that case, we typically ask them to kind of close their eyes, and if they had to pick 3 items to pass down to their loved ones, what would those 3 items be? And it's fascinating where typically like they have answers right away. And after when we ask them that, they're just like, oh, that wasn't it's not like the most valuable item I own, but it's what matters most, right? So we start there. If they are still feeling overwhelmed, on our platform, we have over 2 dozen free downloadable checklists grouped by theme. So there's one for like there's your work self. There's one for even military and veterans. Back to the earlier conversation piece about discharge papers and military insignia and pins. Sometimes you know exactly what those are for. And your loved ones, though, may have absolutely no idea. So if we are working with a family who has a veteran or even an active duty officer in the family, we really encourage them to take a moment and document what those pins, what those patches, challenge coins, right? I'm former intelligence officer and I've got a bunch of challenge coins at home. And my daughter once asked what they were like actually worth. Like, could she go to the store and buy something with them? And I was like, no, sweetie, there's no monetary value. They're mementos from different like missions or things I was a part of. She was like, well, what's good is that? Like, I'd rather have a quarter. So, even in my own household, like will document the challenge coins and the stories behind them because otherwise it ends up just being stuff, right? And one of the things that we do, if someone and sometimes we have families who maybe they inherit an estate. And this is
Mm.
the part that we really hate because it's kind of like you're trying to put together the pieces and you don't know. So in that case, one of our tools that we have on our platform is an AI assistant to help identify what the item is and any historical details, which again, oftentimes when families inherit a lot of that military patches, pins, different military insignia, they don't know what it is, sadly. And that's where sometimes they can use our RD Assist to help them identify it and fill in the gaps of why it matters, what it meant, what it could tell them potentially about the service of their loved ones. So we between our checklists, between our kind of our tutorials, and we have a lot of kind of we have an entire section of our platform dedicated to kind of meeting you where you're at. So, are you a family genealogist or historian? Great. Here's the top 5 tips for you. If you're someone who's downsizing, top 5 tips for you. So we really try to again help people see themselves kind of in their journey dealing with their items and their keepsakes. Because again, someone who's downsizing is a very different motivation for someone who is estate planning. And then those also have very different motivations if you're, in your 30s and 40s and have young children, or if you're in your 70s and 80s and you're thinking more about kind of legacy preservation and storytelling. And so we try to meet people where they're at. So there's no one easy answer to that question.
Makes sense. For what it's worth, I recently learned, and this probably makes sense to you as a former Intel person, but uh, we're wrapping up a book now for that I do have permission to talk about. It's for a Navy surgeon, um, and he left us a glowing testimony and all this stuff. And he said, make sure when you crop the image that you get all the chest candy in it. And I was like, what is chest candy? And it was exactly what you're talking about. He said other military guys will know
Yep.
exactly what it means. And yeah, but yes, it is to someone not in the military. You're right. It is a complete set of mysteries.
Yep.
Not only what they are, but why they go in that particular locations. Um, Manny, I'm always curious how when people think genealogy, they think family tree, right? And that's great because it's a structure we all tell ourselves we understand, right? Very few people, myself included, can speak confidently about what a fourth cousin 3 times removed is, but some people, like you, can. With that said, can you speak about how and when you come across stuff that sits outside of the family tree? So your team, you're going through all these records, you're putting, grandma's name was this, great grandma's name was that, and then you come across like ship logs and census records and all these cool things. How do you generally incorporate that in, you present it to a family and you say, we built the family tree. I'm thinking of that old late night infomercial line of, but wait, there's more. Like, can you sort of tell us a bit more about the other things you come across when you're trying to fill out what a family tree looks like?
Yeah, and so I think the family tree is a good like map, if you will. But it's not the story. It's
Mm.
not, the heart of your family. And so when you start digging into your family history research, you can use the pedigree chart as a map. So we know we're talking about this great grandmother, and it helps us identify who she is in relation to us. But then you kind of can dig into her story. You can see the census record and see that, oh, when she was 65, she also had grandkids living with her. What did her life look like? Because she had a couple generations under her roof. How, and grandpa's passed away and you know she's on Social Security, and how is she helping support this household when she's got all these little babies around when they're not even her babies. And so you see some more stories that, yes, there's a pedigree chart that helps us map out who these people are, but the census records and the ship logs, it can tell us more about, they left England, you know at this specific time because of this religious reason or whatever, and they moved over, and you can see the ship logs of all of their immigration, all of their travels, and it starts to put together a story of maybe what their life might look like outside of the documents. And I
Mm.
think that that's a really fun way when you start, people think, I just need to fill in this family line. I've got this blank space here. Who is this person? But when you really start doing the research and you start finding the stories, I think that's when the magic and the life comes to it. And it's so much fun to start piecing together, this is who this person was. And their census record will tell you what their job was. And so you're like, oh yeah, they worked at the iron worker, like whatever, they're a shoemaker, they were a housewife, or whatever their job was. You can get a sense of what their life may have looked like, and it starts piecing together a story. We have a new service offering that I really love. It's called our Elite 250, and it's basically like we will go through and do, it's our most elite, extensive amount of research. And then we take all of our findings and we put it together in a tailored presentation for your family, and we can put together a whole like family reunion or special event for your family tailored to your family. And it's, I think, a really beautiful way to take what we would normally write out the stories in the report, take it and put it into an in-person experience. And it's this beautiful moment with your family that you get to share where you guys came from and share it with the people who are here now. And it's just a beautiful way to pull, yes, but there's a census record and there's a pedigree chart and there's, all these little things that we think what it makes up family history, but it's really the heart and soul. And that's why we have so many clients that say, this changed our lives. Like, this was so beautiful and so impactful for our family. Like, they're so grateful for the things that we do, because not only are we finding the documents, we're helping them piece together the stories. So I think it's fun. I don't know how, like, the one thing that I have a question for you guys is, when you're working with people today in the right now, we work so closely with digitized records. How do we take our physical things and be good ancestors now, or help our grandparents or whatever document those physical beings outside of like a story? You know what I mean? Like, how do we digitize them and put them in for people to, because we live in such a digital world now.
And Mandy, that's exactly where we jumped in when we
Yeah.
started the company. That was the goal. Started it when my mother passed away, and I inherited 6,000 square feet of keepsakes and mementos and family heirlooms. And oh, by the way, she was a huge antiquer. So how many of those items were just she got a great deal at the local antique shop, or were they actually family heirlooms? And that was the tough part. And you can't, with those items, you can't cut a grand piano in thirds, right? You can't cut the family quilt in thirds. So digitization became a way, like for when I was approaching that problem, digitization was critical because only one sibling, like one of us, could get the piano, one of us could get the quilt, one of us could get the engagement ring, whatever it happened to be. And that's where, when we approached kind of the how do you ensure that those physical, tangible objects and assets, they get passed down and kept in the family, but others can still enjoy and understand this, like the history and the memories and why they're a part of the family. So with us, we try to make it as simple as possible. Like, you can take a photo. That's if that's all you do, fabulous. Like, you've at least captured a photo and you can add a short story and some details. Totally up to you. If you want to add a video, some people do like a 360 video. We have others who will put a record player on slow-mo mode, and then it's a vase or something. We'll have it kind of spin around as I record a video. It's amazing what our members think of like how to capture and how to digitize those items. The other part of it for us too is we recognize it's not just the items, right? It's not just, say, the Tiffany's vase. There may be very well, there could be documentation, there could be a receipt, there could be certificate of authenticity, there could be an appraisal if you're dealing with artwork or jewelry. So we also wanted to ensure that those documents got digitized because sometimes they aren't. They're kept in a shoebox or under the bed or who knows where they are. So as we built out the Artifacts platform, it was first step is taking a photo. And then if you want to add video and audio, awesome. It's one more step. You can add a short story. It could be 5 words, my mother gave me this, or it could be much longer. You can then attach documentation. But it's trying to enable us all to have a digital record that can then, although only one person can inherit the actual item, the entire family, cousins and second cousins and third cousins and people who you don't really know but they're still your cousins can have access to this if they're doing family research or if they're trying to piece together the details of what was this person's life like. The other reason we talk about tangible items where digitization is so important is insurance. And we think about kind of all like the natural disasters our ancestors have lived through and the number of probably records and photos and items that were lost to flood or fire or other events. The ability to digitize those tangible items creates a record that is hopefully much more permanent than in the olden days, a file folder in a cabinet forgotten about, or again, a shoebox under a bed of a receipt. So we've tried really hard to enable families to digitize to then share so everyone can be literally on the same page of the family story, even if only one loved one gets to keep the actual object. Or, heaven forbid, the object ends up being lost or destroyed or something else happens to it and it's no longer there. You still have the record of it that's part of the family history. So that's how we've approached it. Luke, I'm sure you all, with the writing and interviewing of families, you're naturally making that digitized record. So it's probably second nature for your families that you work with to be able to share that with others. How does that work for you all?
Yeah, so um, we have the luxury, and this sounds because it is oxymoronic, but of doing history in real time. Um, and what I mean in practice by that is we have tons of great interviewers. We pick them for their organizational skills, for their kind and warm demeanor, right? We have to form trust very quickly. And then we have to show up each time knowing what we're going to talk about, keeping track of what's been said, what hasn't been said, where do we need to shine more light, etc. But in a way that feels casual on the other end. So the person we have the pleasure of supporting doesn't have to do any homework or worry about what are we going to talk about. Um, Outside of the main group of interviewers, we do have some people who are trained historians, and often we bring them onto projects. They're writers as well, but when there's a deep uh, cultural component to a project, these transnational stories of someone came from here, went to here, went to here, and we go, oh, to tell that right, we need someone who has done research on that region or so on and so forth. Because even if it's a region where we all might read about it in the news today, 100 years in the future, we can't assume that people reading it then will have the cultural context to understand why did this population move from there to there. Where I'm going with this is one of our historians, fantastic guy, um, said he loves writing these types of stories because he finally gets to interview his subjects. In his scholarly work, he's a professor. In his scholarly work, um, he's always trying to reconstruct stories from primary sources. And I asked him once what the ratio of primary source to final page in a book was for his scholarly work, and it's like 50 to 1. So, he'll go through all these primary sources to distill it down to one page of really accurate info about what was happening when. The ratio in what we do is quite different. I don't know the exact number, but over 12 interviews, well, maybe it's like 4 to 1. Because over 12 interviews, typically that'll yield 350 or 400 pages of transcripts. That's after we've taken out the superfluous info, the ums, the ahs, the stutters, that kind of stuff. And maybe we're distilling it down to anywhere from 150 to 200 pages, depending on what we're trying to do with the project. with the photos interspersed. And so, from an editorial standpoint, this idea of history in real time, which again, it sounds silly because it um, is really empowering because when we have a question, as long as the person we're interviewing is in great health or good health, we can actually ask them that question and clarify. We also have the literary option to skip over things if there's a little doubt, or if there's part of their life they can't talk about or don't want to talk about. Um, we can redact things. For instance, it's really, really common, maybe a third or fourth of the time when someone has a lot of grandkids, I would say about a third of the time they accidentally name their favorite grandchild. And we have it literally written into our procedures to check for that in the transcripts and go back to them and just mention, you got a couple extra grandkids, maybe we take this out. And it's never with ill intent. It's generally just, they saw them yesterday and had a great time. Um, so we have all of those options to sort of go back to the primary source and say, tell us more about your honeymoon. Um, and we are really cognizant of uh, health as well. So, you know, we have candid and frank conversations with families when someone is deep in their 90s, and we say, hey, you know, respectfully, what kind of time frames are we working with here? Because if someone says, you know what, they were in better health a year ago, they're all right now, we chat with the family. We say, hey, what if we do 6 interviews, really high level across the entire life? And then if they have the energy and stamina, we'll go back and fill in the gaps. But what we don't want to happen is a ton of information about the first 30 years of their life. Then maybe there's a health issue, and we don't have anything about the next, 65 years. Um, but to your question about sort of um, digitizing, we have this just amazing opportunity to, in between interviews, go through the transcripts and say, oh, we think we understand this, but either we've misinterpreted and we realize it as we review our notes, or maybe the chronology doesn't make sense. For instance, there's a whole generation in the 40s that spent some time away from college to go serve and then come back, and figuring out whether or not they went back to undergrad or grad school or continued in the military. Sometimes we help people figure that out because it was a long time ago. And so we start to sort of map out their own chronology. Because frankly, if you asked me what I had for breakfast today, I probably couldn't tell you. So asking me what, if I'm lucky enough to make it to 90, asking me what I did 60 years ago is at face value a bit of an unfair question. So we're more of partners in figuring that out. Um, yeah, I truly love what I get to do. It's a whole lot of fun. And
I have a question for you. If there's someone, so this is inspired because I had went over to a new friend's house last night and I got the privilege of talking to his mom for most of the night while everybody else was off, in the garage or doing whatever they're doing. And she told me, she's like, I want to write a book and call it All the Things You Didn't Know You Need to Know. And then she started telling me all these things that I don't need to know, but I need to know. And she was just a hoot to listen to. In with people that have just so much stories to tell and things like that, how can we best, I feel like, serve them? And like what I immediately wanted to do was take out my phone and just start recording her, like
yeah.
just audio record it, and then I don't know, maybe transcribe it later. And so, is there a way that you think that, everybody in their everyday when they're just chatting with grandma and it comes to mind that we could do to help, preserve their stories and their things that you didn't know that you need to know?
Yeah. So I love the title, by the way.
Yeah, isn't it lovely?
It's great. So sometimes a good portion of someone's book are forward-looking statements. What do they want for their immediate family, their community, and then we define community at different levels, and we get some of that info out of them. If they were a small business owner, a family business owner, a lot more of that what do you need to know type stuff comes out. It can be what do you need to know about the family, it can be what do you need to know about shortcutting business, right? If you don't have to have the people come after you make the same mistakes, if you will, Great, right? If you can save someone a lot of headache and heartache in a short period of time, wonderful. So I just jotted down a couple notes based on what you said. The two things I always tell people whenever they're talking about doing their own writing, besides, keep going, it's great. Obviously, we can support, but my mission in all of this is get it down by any means. So if they write it themselves and we edit or another company edits, totally fine. But the two things that'll save them a world of hurt are outlining, outlining, and then outlining. Um, like figure out what you want to say before you say it. You will save so much time. You will stop going off on these roads that might not be as relevant. And those are fine in interviews, but it takes a long time for a non-professional to write a memoir.
Mm.
And outlining is going to save, it's going to lead to a better product. It's going to lead to someone actually finishing. The second thing is back it up, back it up, back it up, right? Like some people um, only have in handwritten notes, and that gives me like a little panic in my chest. I tell them find a grandkid, snap a bunch of photos. It's fine if they just live on somebody's phone or whatever it may be, but have some way of backing it up in case a fire or you lose it or it blows away in the wind. Those are the two biggest things it's the biggest bang for your buck in terms of avoiding pain in the process.
Mm.
Um, in terms of recording, I want to circle back to the specifics of your question in just a moment because it's a scenario that comes up and it feels like you can't replicate it. And so I want to talk about that. But there are really like in this world of how to get a version of what we do done, there are three options. Um, First, so this isn't a pitch for our stuff directly. I'll show you the ones we did, but this is some company, tell me your story, mom. There are a bunch of these on Amazon. They're great. I don't know who wrote this one, but I flipped through it. It's really good. And there are like four or five others. We did our own versions, and same sort of idea. You fill in the blanks. Obviously, the goal here is not, to make any money from this. It's let's get people familiar with the process. A few of them will call us from this, and the numbers all work.
And that helps with the outline part, right?
The outline, or this could be the final product if you just want to dive in, right? Uh, this is a heavier question, but how has your relationship evolved over the years?
Mm.
Or what was your favorite book or story as a child? So we're not going to get everything.
I like that one too, because then if they still have that book, I think that's where Heather's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
taking your physical and your stories and you piece them together. And I love this stuff so much. I think it's so much fun.
So those are great. They do feel a bit like homework. And so for some people, that's great. For other people, they peter out, but they've got something down. The second bucket is this wave of sort of AI apps
Mhm.
where they either have you record, maybe a prompt a week, um, and then eventually they use AI to smush it all together. Um, or you email, back to them and their software pulls it all together. Those are also great for uh, you know, someone who can stick with that process. So another great tool. Obviously, we're sort of a full service thing where we're going to come in and just our guiding light is how do we get you to the finish line, a complete product that you can hold, that's going to be beautiful. It's going to look like something you pluck up a Barnes and Noble shelf, etc. But my point here is there are lots of ways to do it even without us. I obviously think, your goals have to align with the method. Um, I know I started this company because, as I mentioned, memoirghostwriting.com is a terrible name. It's just what we do. But it was born out of another company I started with a terrible name called proofreadingservices.com. It's just what we do. It's Uber for proofreading. It's on demand. It's 24/7, and a team still runs that. I started that about 15 years ago, and people just kept coming to us and saying, I wrote my memoir. I've been writing it for 6 or 7 years. Can you guys edit it? And we said, yeah, absolutely. Internally, we kept saying, wow, 6 or 7 years is like 5 or 6 years too long. And we also kind of had this hunch that for everyone who came to us, there were 99 other people who started and didn't finish.
Mm.
And so, we've had 27,000 clients at proofreadingservices.com over the last 15 years, and we just kept hearing that. And that was the moment where we realized, let's solve the bigger problem of actually just getting life stories. And we had the writers, designers, editors, all those people, and they're great at what they do. So I always encourage people to think about defining what finishing looks like so that they can march to that goal. If they don't, they end off up in these processes where it could be as long as 10 years of writing their memoir. Again, writing something is better than nothing. But to circle back to what you were saying, Mandy, about, in that moment, how do you capture that conversation? Personally, uh, how I would do it is I would say, this is so interesting. Do you mind if I write some of this down?
Mm.
You start writing, and then you sort of suggest to the person, you go, hey, I can't really keep up. Do you mind if I record this? You kind of need to step into it like that, because if you just met this person, recording in the very first moment can be like jarring, and people speak very differently. And so you can actually just take notes the whole time. But if you sort of show the interest, show that you're genuinely taking notes, but there's so much here and you don't want to miss any of it. Sometimes if you show through action that, you're jotting things down, you're really interested, and then you make sort of the second ask, they're way more likely uh, to allow you to record without changing, you know, how they're speaking. And we always remind people, it's confidential, et cetera. But it's one of the reasons we don't record the very first interaction with clients, because people can kind of be uncomfortable until you've established that trust. Um, it's it's always a challenge though, because you want to have the exact words, and you want people to speak freely. I know from interviewing a lot of retired politicians that you can see it in their faces when they switch into politician mode, and you're like, oh, we got to work it back, because if I get politician answers, this is of no use to your family.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Mandy, I think that's one of the reasons that our community of users very much DIY, right? When you're sitting around the table after dinner and you're having dessert and coffee and mom or grandma starts telling those stories, or you're out for a walk, a
yeah,
lot of our members, because it's trusted family, right? I think it's very different. It's not a client and a journalist or, a professional writer, which, Luke, it's amazing the skills that you have on your team. But when you're sitting around the table with family, our members can pull out the Artifacts app, say, Grandma, this is awesome. Do you mind if I record you? Because keep going. And usually she starts laughing. It's like, yeah, this is awesome. And she'll keep telling even more stories. And that's again one of the reasons why when we built the Artifacts platform, it's video, it's audio, it's the written, long or short, your choice, the story, it's photos, it's all there. Because again, some folks they don't want to be on video, right?
yeah,
If you're like, Grandma, can I videotape you telling me the story? Her answer is gonna be like, oh no, I haven't done my hair, like whatever it happens to be, right? But Grandma, can I record you? This is amazing. I want to be able to share it with my cousin or with dad or with mom or whomever. And the stories keep flowing and it's very natural in tone. And then you're getting the beautiful thing with that we've seen within our platform is that you have the story in their own voice and you have the laughter. You have all those small details and moments where when I was building artifacts, for me, my mother passed away so suddenly, we never got her story. And
mm,
we didn't have any saved voicemails. Like she was so young and otherwise, it was out of the blue. So for us, it was, I wish I had my mother's laugh. I wish I had her voice. I wish even, I had her like reprimanding me for having my elbows on the table or whatever it happened to be, like those small
that's
moments.
it right now, yes.
Yeah, exactly. But there are things that I think we take sometimes for granted. But when the person's gone, which I think was one of your earlier points, Luke, in the conversation, yourself, currently, like a 17-year-old today is going to be very different than when they're 77, 60 years from now. And we all change, and what we value over time changes too. So the ability to simply, in our case, pop out your phone. We all have these amazing recording devices in our pockets. And if you're among loved ones and grandma's telling an awesome story, ask. and then hit the record button. And then you now, because everything within our app, you do it in the app. It's private, it's secure, it's not shared with anyone until you want to share. But when you do want to share, if you've built a family sharing list, a click of a button, you can send it to the whole family.
That's
And
awesome.
it's that whole the digitization, the sharing, and then the capturing the actual small moments so easy. And that's a big part of it for us. It's yes, there's the keepsakes, but there's the stories that go with them that all make a part of the family history.
I love this so much. There's so much heart and soul in everything that we all do. And I just think that this is so beautiful and like a great way to think of how we can be good ancestors now and help our generations that are still here ahead of us document their stories. And I just think it's so beautiful. So this is wonderful. Thank you guys so much for both being here. I really
Oh, thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
us. And
Yeah. So let's real quick, let's just give a plug-in for everything that you do. So Heather, if people want to work with you or download your app or whatever it is that your subscription maybe, go ahead, let's hear about it.
So you can go to artifacts.com. That's artifcts.com, or you can download the app in the App Store or in the Google Play Store. You can also, your first 5 artifacts are always free. We do this because Matt Paxton, star of Legacy List with Matt Paxton and Hoarders, is on our advisory board, and his whole Legacy List concept is 5 items that tell your family story. So
Mm.
we want to ensure that anyone, anywhere, can create their Legacy List using artifacts. So there's no need to pay for your first 5 artifacts. If you do want to do a membership, our most popular is $119 a year. You get unlimited membership, unlimited artifacts, and 4 accounts. So you keep one for yourself, you gift 3 to family and friends. You can artifact together, help crowdsource some of that family history collection, right? It's not all on you. You may be the family keeper, but put your loved ones to work. Start building out those family histories and stories and memories. And like you said, be a good ancestor. Do not become the next generation's genealogy research project.
Oh, I love that. Fun. And Luke, how can we get in touch with you?
yeah, I mean, I just want to underscore what Heather is saying for a moment. I love that it's a thing that, you know, you can start in seconds and be up and running. You built something really, really cool. Yeah, so memoirghostwriting.com. I we obviously write memoirs, but a lot of people get scared off by that term. So I always tell people the first conversation we have is about someone's goals, right? It doesn't have to be a memoir. It can be a mini memoir. It can be a photo album. It can be an album related to an art collection, etc. With that in mind, and given the intimacy of what we provide, the best way to get in contact is just Luke at memoirghostwriting.com. There's also a number that on the website that they can call. But every conversation, despite that we've grown quite a bit over the years, starts with me just helping people figure out why are we doing this? What does a good finished product or great finished product look like? And so just, shoot me an email at luke at memoirghostwriting.com. And um, as I mentioned, there are many paths to accomplishing what we do. So if we're not the right fit, I will probably end up referring to one of the 2 people on this call and say, hey, it sounds like you're actually trying to accomplish this. Start there. Um, yeah, but thank you both so much for sharing what you do.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Thank you for your partnership. And of course, if anybody wants to reach out for genealogy research services, Legacy Tree Genealogists is a worldwide genealogy research firm, and we help people break down their brick walls. So put your family history in our hands, and we'll help you get your stories and your family history all worked out. So cool.
Um,
Thank you guys so much. This was absolutely beautiful. I appreciate you guys.
So
Mandy,
much.
just it's sometimes hard to toot your own horn. Can I just share the coolest thing I think about Legacy Tree?
Hey, yeah, please do.
Well, it's actually 2 things. One, I didn't know that you guys do helping people find their like birth fathers, right?
Hmm.
That's a thing. That is something that sits outside of genealogy. And when I heard that, I thought that is such a high value add to someone's life. And the second thing is there are many genealogy companies in the world. A lot of them are great. Legacy Tree has in-country options. So it's
Yeah.
it's not like, you go online and you try to do the digital stuff your own. They're obviously going to do that themselves. But when I talk to people about your services, I say, hey, if there's like a document in Belarus, this company actually has contacts on the ground that can go into the archive and find it potentially. And that's a very cool differentiator. So I just wanted to sort of tee that up because I think it's really cool.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you both.
Thanks for listening to the Legacy Tree podcast. If you're ready to take the next step in your own family history journey, we'd be honored to help. Put your family history in our hands and learn more about working with our team at legacytree.com.